Rhine and Shine, podcast brought you by Blue Rhine Industries.
Welcome to Rhine and Shine. On today's episode, we have Nikolay, the CEO of Seastore, who is a regional industry expert in gas stations. So welcome, Nikolay.
Thank you, Nita. Pleasure to be here.
So perhaps you can give our audience and the listeners a little bit of an introduction to yourself and a bit of the background.
Sure. So you see, my professional life is all related to gas stations in one way or another. I spent quite a lot of time in Shell. Yeah, again, always retail, always gas stations. I joined them in Russia, had few different roles from very different angles of the business there. Then I moved to London to the global headquarters. I was part of the global team there. Then I actually moved to Oman, and I was relaunching the convenience store business for Shell in Oman. And then since 2 years, I'm here in the UAE and working as an independent consultant, helping again the fuel station companies around the Middle East, North Africa, a bit of Asia, to develop the new concept to get their business future-proofed and things along those lines.
Yeah. So today, I think we want to both have a conversation on the future of gas stations. Yep. What does this look like? We've got the forecourt, we've got the convenience store, and then you've got all the other services around a gas station. And I think, with your regional expertise, I'd really like to take a deep dive into this particular region and what makes it different.
Yep.
And what these gas stations need to provision for to make them future safe. So, what would you say are the differentiators between this market and the European market and the American market?
I will start with lingo, right? One thing that I heard when I moved to the region that I never heard before, because the forecourt term is something that you hear a lot everywhere, right? A lot of people calling the area of the pumps forecourt.
Yeah.
But actually in this region, there's a term backcourt, right?
Okay.
So relating to the Seastore and other services.
So that's called backcourt.
Backcourt, right. So it's not everyone calling that, but some people, some companies calling it backcourt. So forecourt and the backcourt, right? And I think this kind of forward and back represents the classical traditional thinking of the petrol station business, because you have the fuel part, which is the main thing. It's at the forefront. That's the kind of the main reason. And then you have everything at the back, right? So, and this is how, fuel station companies around the globe really were, thinking of their business and developing their business for ages. And now it's changing. So again, coming back to your question in terms of what's different in this region. So first of all, you need to think of the transaction, how transaction is happening. So if you go to a petrol station in Europe, let's say, you're filling your gas, and in most cases, you need to walk inside your store.
It's self-service.
Yeah.
Self-service, you fuel yourself, then you've got to go inside to pay.
Yeah, exactly. Even in some cases, it may be serviced, like there is an attendant who would fill up your car, but you still need to go inside and pay inside, right? So that means that you have this traffic that is fuel traffic that is automatically converted to at least walking customers of the Seastore, right? And then it's the job of the Seastore, kind of how that represented, merchandised, and managed to convert those customers to buy something else in there. In here, in the Middle East, broadly, you have full transaction happening on the pump, right? You cannot even if you would like to, you cannot pay for the fuel in the Seastore, right? So some of the companies tried that, didn't really work. So you have this transaction there. So if you think of average petrol station, you have thousands of customers going in and out for fuel, right? Easily from 2,000 to 5,000 customers a day, right? And then in the Seastore, you have only those who specifically wanted to come and buy something getting there, right? So, and that's the biggest difference. And this is kind of the main challenge that those fuel companies have, because they want to convert more people from fuel to the store. Yeah. Right? Because
it's where the high margins are.
Exactly.
Right? With
exactly,
the margins being squeezed on gas or subsidization, I guess that's where they're making most of their money now. Yeah.
Well, again, if you think of the absolute terms, you have fuel, which is relatively low margin, even though in the UAE specifically, where we're sitting is rather high by global standards, but around the rest of the Middle East, it's very low. So you have something that is relatively low margin, but very high volume, right? So this is how your kind of business is running. But then whatever you're selling in the Seastore and the food and so on, this is where a lot of high marginal items. There less volume but way higher margin.
Yeah.
And then another thing that I would mention in terms of comparing the kind of Europe, US, and the Middle East, a lot of people who are working in the industry, even inside here in the region, they feeling that, oh, we need to develop this, we need to think about that, we need to look at the experience in other places. But frankly, very kind of objectively speaking, the level of operations, the level of offer in the Middle East is already quite evolved, right? Comparing to other places. Because again, Europe went through a massive transformation, right? When it was small, very small footprint, gas station only.
Independent owners.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Into bigger chains, more focus on food, more focus on coffee and so on. So that was a transformation, that was a journey. In here, traditionally, again, it has something to do with the public transportation and how, it's less of a public transport, more of a private cars in here. That's why the concept of a petrol station or a stop place on the road, on the way, is something that everyone is so used to.
Yeah.
And you have all those different services. If you go to a petrol station in the Middle East, by default, you would expect to see there not only fuel and the Seastore, but other things as well. Coffee shop, tea shop, a mosque, toilets and some other places. I saw some random things on petrol stations in the Middle East, right? I saw once a library, right?
Oh, wow. I've never seen a library here.
Right? And then you have, things like, barber shops and laundry services and so on, right? So for customers in the Middle East, it's quite normal to go to a petrol station for something else rather than fuel.
Okay. So it's like a little hub.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like a hub providing services to the community.
Exactly. And this is something that European retailers have been trying to achieve throughout the decades, and something that Middle Eastern retailers have by default. But then the level of service, level of offers, how that evolving, the customer proposition, how the customer's changing, that's a different story.
Yeah. So let's take a look at the customer, the demographic, and this particular region. Who is the customer? What does that customer expect from a gas station, and what will they expect moving forward?
It's an interesting topic, right? And it's a transformation as well. It's a journey. Because if you think of the classic petrol station customer, right? Someone who's driving a car, and in here everyone driving a car, right? And actually the split versus personal car ownership and the company car ownership is different in Europe and in the Middle East. In Europe, it's more leaning towards the company ownership, and in here it's private ownership. So it's a lot of private cars. And again, families have on average more than, one car, 2 to 3. If you think of Teslas, it's normally a third car, but we will talk about that, right?
I've got some questions on the EVs.
Yeah, so then you have someone who is coming to the petrol station in their car all the time, multiple times a week. But also in terms of the demographics and people behind the wheel, it's changing as well. I think a very good example of that change is Saudi, right? So where a massive influx of female drivers suddenly appear, right? So over the last couple of years, a lot of people got their licenses, bought their car or leased their car and started driving. So, and that's a completely different profile of the customer that you need to cater for. And also, if you think of the Middle East, it's on average quite young population in here, especially if you think of the local population. Yeah. Again, Saudi, 70% less than 35 years old, similar in UAE and Oman. So it's a very young generation. And they want things differently. They want, they shop differently. They interact with each other differently.
So we're looking at younger millennials, Gen Z.
Gen Zs,
very much a connected consumer. They're expecting frictionless, contactless, fully autonomous experiences, right?
Exactly, as much as possible. And the petrol station, it's not a place where they expect that by default, right? So if you do something in a petrol station of that sort, that will excite them, right? And again, in terms of the connectivity, like digital connectivity, social media connectivity, Middle Eastern countries are among the top users of any social media, right? So be that
it's a very device-led and social media kind of led community.
Exactly, yeah. So I think on average, let's say young Arabs, they have on average 3 social media accounts, which one is kind of their official account for the families and friends, right? Or maybe for the families. Then you have a real one, which is kind of where they interact with their friends. And then the third one could be for their business or their interests, something like that, right? So when I talk to senior leaders in the petrol station companies, I normally tell them that if you have kids and those kids have social media accounts and you know that social media account, most probably that's not the real one.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? So you need to be aware of that. And then again, another interesting thing for the Gen Zs in particular, and that's around the globe, it's a little bit less in here, but if you think of the Gen Zs globally, they're actually less interested in owning a car.
Yeah.
Right. So going forward, they have, the car lease or, car sharing, the ride sharing options.
Uber pool, public transport infrastructure is, far more mature in other markets like Europe. So, okay, so how do you think that's going to shift in this region? The stats globally are that, the younger generations will be owning less vehicles.
Yeah.
That's going to impact the future of the gas stations. And then we've got this shift towards electric vehicles as well. So the rise of EVs. Both of these, do you think that those are going to be real not issues, but are those going to drive change in this region anytime soon?
Well, it's hard to tell when exactly it will happen, but it will happen. So when it comes to the car ownership and the change in the younger generation patterns, I think that will happen here rather fast, even though car is a very important part of life in the Middle East, right?
The car is king.
Yeah, exactly. But I think going forward, if you think of, average 2-3 cars per family,
household,
right? So the number of cars, I think, gradually will kind of reduce, right? So it may be one to 2 rather than 2 to 3. It will take time before they really switch out to other means as they evolve. But again, we don't know. Maybe tomorrow there's something, some discrepancy, that there's some way of transportation that is way easier, way more affordable, right? And then everyone switches to that. But naturally evolving, I think it will be slow kind of regression of that car ownership. But the EV is another interesting challenge. So if you think of a petrol station business, as a provider of energy for your vehicle, it's a monopoly, right? So you cannot get fuel anywhere else, at least legally, right? So you need to go to a petrol station, and that's the forced kind of visit. For you just need to do that. You have no choice. But with the EVs, you have other choices, other providers.
In this region, we've got Carrefour. We've got those services that I'm not familiar with in Europe at all, where they come and serve you your petrol, your gas, fuel, whatever you want to call it, and also some kind of convenience goods as well linked to your car, right? Some services. Yeah,
well, you see, when it comes to the Carrefour, it's actually a very good, interesting business, right? So again, digitally driven, really good app, seamless experience for the consumer. But it's really the Carrefour and then the 3 other petrol station brands, right? So they do the delivery. So essentially, apart from Carrefour, the same companies who are running the fuel business, you're purchasing from them, right? In terms of, and actually Carrefour pushing that, they now offering, apart from fuel, other services, right? So they can change your tires, they can do some minor servicing and so on. So they're really adding those services. And that's, again, through the app, seamless experience and all that. So it's actually an interesting example to look at. But if you think of a petrol station
traditionally,
that is, as I told, the monopoly was there, and it's not there anymore with the EVs, right? So if you're driving an EV, you can charge it at home. You can charge it at the university, office, shopping mall, public charging, and also petrol station, right? Because all of those petrol station companies, they're looking into EV chargers as well. So basically, there's a variety of choices, different pricing, different speed, right? Depending on where you live, what you have access for, how quickly you want to charge, and so on. But you have that choice. So, and that will mean that less and less people actually will come to the petrol station to purchase energy in one way or form. And actually, if you think of places where electrification is a bit more advanced, like Norway and the UK, one of the sentiments that consumers share, one of the many reasons why they like their EVs, apart from, sustainability and, lesser maintenance cost and so on, they saying in that list of reasons, maybe number 9 or 10, they saying that another good reason why I'm having EV is that I don't need to go to a petrol station anymore.
Oh, that's interesting. So that's always seen as a chore. Going, waiting in the queue, fueling.
Exactly.
Okay, so now, and I can see that as well, because I've thought as well about, fast charging.
Yeah.
You have fast charging in shopping malls.
Yeah.
Places like that, where you could just leave your car where you're going to leave it anyway.
Yeah.
Here we've got fantastic car wash services. So, you're getting the car cleaned, you can fuel it, and then go into the mall and, kill the time otherwise, where it is almost dead time when you go to a gas station.
Yeah. And that's
you're just twiddling your thumbs, and then the car's inching forward closer to your turn.
Exactly. And again, there's a lot of queues in here, right? Because there's less number of stations versus, number of population. So again, it's for the petrol station companies, it's a great opportunity as well as a threat to reimagine themselves, right? So what would be those services? What would be those additional offers? What is the tomorrow's reason for consumers to come to a petrol station? Or in some cases, actually, those petrol station companies or fuel companies, they renaming their businesses, not as a retail or petrol station business, to mobility business, right? So they're saying that they're providing mobility in one way or another. So whatever those mobility hubs that will be in the future.
What does mobility mean when we talk about gas stations?
Well, you see, if it's in the city, you can talk about, of course, the classic fuel and the EV charging. You can talk about car sharing services. You can talk about, taxi hubs. You can talk about micromobility, things like, those scooters that you can rent, maybe electric scooters that are being charged there.
Like the Boris bikes.
Yeah,
like that.
those, things like that. So those micromobility solutions, right? So petrol stations, they think along those lines, right? Or what else we can do, what kind of mobility choices we can provide. But anyway, everyone is scratching their head now and think how we need to change our business to make sure that people are still coming to our locations. And maybe locations choice will be different as well, right? So when you're developing a petrol station, it's one type of location. When you're developing an urban mobility hub, it's another type of station, right? If you think of charging, you need a lot of electricity, power available, infrastructure there.
Different.
So there's a lot of question marks for the fuel station companies, right? So again, in some other places, that electrification is very heavily pushed through authorities, some, the policies that are there and so on. That's why if you think of places like Norway or Iceland, the adoption is very high, right? So 80-90% of all the new cars that are registered are all EVs, right? And again, Iceland is a great example. It was an easy thing. That's something that government did. If you think of an Iceland, it's an island. You have one big road circling the island and then a couple of big highways in the other. So what authorities did, they introduced the charging facilities, relatively high speed, every 50 kilometers in all those main roads.
So you're never without,
exactly.
You're never stuck.
Exactly. So that's just settled, right? So the kind of the charge anxiety, the range anxiety is not there anymore, right? So you can then easily buy electric vehicle for whatever reason and just drive there. And that's why 90+% of new cars in Iceland, it's EVs. In here, it's not that easy, right? So that transition will be way slower, but we see already there's interest from consumers for the electric vehicles. So they do want to experience that. They do want to try it. Again, right now it's choice of a more affluent communities. So as I told you, Teslas on average are third car in the household. But still it's growing numbers of Teslas, and other types of EV vehicles in here in the region. And at the same time, there is a number of policies and there's a push from authorities to switch, let's say, the governmental fleets to EVs and so on. Right now, the price is a barrier. But as you have more choices, more brands coming into the market or localizing their manufacturing, you have a great example of a couple of brands that will be manufactured in Saudi. One is Lucid, which is a premium EV. Another one is Hyundai. They actually will be manufacturing their cars, EVs and normal cars in Saudi. And then Saudi also doing their own brand, which is Seastore, right? So that would be low price. So the moment you have...
It's a huge push there from the top down. And I think that's interesting as well to have a look at how that's going to impact the direction. So just while we're on the Saudi topic there, so it seems like there's a push there on the EVs.
Yeah.
Also, touching back onto the younger generation there. In Saudi, we see these new developments being announced, these new urban communities, smart cities, the most famous being NEOM.
NEOM, of course,
We've got NEOM, but there's a number of them, both in Saudi, I think there's some here as well, that are under development. How is that going to change the makeup of gas station locations, the purpose of them? Do you see...
Well, you see, the thing is that everybody talks about 15 minutes seating.
Yeah.
Right? So
everything walkable within 15 minutes to your hospital, your school, your place of work. That's what this means, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So whatever you need in life is 15 minutes away, either walking or driving. Right? So
or public transport is what they're pushing towards.
Yeah, exactly.
Vehicle-less communities.
Yeah. And frankly speaking, in some places in the Middle East it's already there, right? So I know that you live in Dubai, you would not experience that, but in Abu Dhabi it's almost there. It's really 15 minutes drive anywhere. But that's just me teasing some of those folks. The idea is that you have a place, a community that is fully equipped with whatever is needed. So, and I think it again depends on how whatever needs of the communities will be, right? If it's still, internal combustion engine cars mostly, then you put a gas station there, right? As easy as that. Or you deliver the fuel there. But again, if there's a push for, zero emission, smart city, 15 minutes and so on, then it will be mostly EVs. And then again, the question is there enough charge from the community? Is there enough grid power there? And then everyone is just charging at their villas, apartments, whatever, or there's a need for additional charging providers. Maybe there will be no need, right? And then again, that circles back to the question, what is the role of a petrol station company, right? So, and this is the threat, right? So maybe if I'm living within a community where everything I need is 15 minutes walk or public transport, and I have my whatever Tesla or Volkswagen ID or whatever, and then I'm charging that in the community hub or at my home, I don't need to go far. I don't need to go anywhere. I don't need that charging or fuel anymore. Right? So, and that is existential threat, right? And then that might happen in 10 years time, 20 years time, 30 years time. But essentially what all the fuel station companies around the globe and in the Middle East have this kind of itching feel that something is coming, something is changing, and we need to reimagine it ourselves, right?
Yeah.
And the number one thing that everyone is thinking about is the coffee, right? Because that's the thing that everyone, it's on the surface, right? At least you would push something that people consume throughout the day, multiple times a day.
Huge market here, coffee. It's so kind of like built in the culture.
Yeah.
Like coffee's late night, and every gas station here has a decent coffee offering, or a branded coffee. Like you've got a Starbucks drive-through, or you've got Tim Hortons. You see a lot of those as well around here. Yeah. So I guess maybe the shift will be less fueling and maybe more of these other services.
Exactly. Because again, the one of the most, at least as far as it seems right now, one of the most sustainable elements of the range of services that we have on a petrol station is actually car wash. Because whatever car you're driving, you need to wash it.
Yeah, especially here.
Exactly, right?
Yeah.
So that's why the car wash business, I think right now, a lot of those companies there don't really see, the full potential of the car wash business. They sometimes they ignore it. Sometimes they do put some efforts, but not enough. But I think car wash is the business that will stay there for longer time than fuel.
Yeah.
It just no brainer, right? And it's extremely marginal, right? So if you think of especially automated wash, right? So you put the capex up front, you invest in that, and the more advanced the technology is, the less breakdowns you'll have and so on. So it's minimum maintenance throughout the cycle of life of that equipment. So it's literally almost, full price. It's almost your margin. It's 90% margin per car wash, right? And you have queues, you have people washing their cars. And again, whatever is Tesla or Ford pickup truck, right? You'll need to wash it.
You'll need to wash it.
Yeah.
And you're right. They don't push it enough. If you compare going to a petrol station and them kind of pushing the car wash service onto you compared to when you go to a shopping mall, or you're going into your apartment block building and they're like, a car wash, ma'am. It's always. I don't think I ever visit a mall without them coming up to me saying, "Would you like your car cleaned?" And imagine if that was at a gas station. I think the conversion would be much higher if every single driver was offered it.
Yeah, exactly. It's a little bit planned, right? So normally people plan washing their car, right? So if you're just in a queue to refuel your gas, and somebody walks up and says, "Hey, do you want a car wash?" There's a coupon or something. Maybe they will not use it instantly.
Yeah, but they're incentivized.
Right? Yeah, but then you can use it same day in the evening, or maybe within the next couple of days, right? So drive that, come back and purchase of the car wash service.
Yeah. So let's talk about digitization.
Yeah.
So that's how we got into the gas station business, was delivering screens, like LED screens, screens in the forecourt, also in the Seastore. And that was for, that conversion of those drivers, as we said before, or passengers in the vehicle to drive that traffic into the store, which we've said has always been a challenge here, right? Because otherwise they're not really incentivized to go in. So I know you've got some great stats on, these gas stations and the impact that this has, but also more than just, we'll look at the digital signage and perhaps you can talk about that, but also frictionless payment and the future of that, and on the go.
Yeah. So you see the first of all, on the screens, right? So it's a no-brainer, right? You need the screens. First of all, right now we have so much information, so much messaging being thrown at us everywhere we go. Right. So sometimes it's just all kind of
information overload.
Yeah, exactly. Overload,
sensory
a buzz.
Overload,
exactly. Right. So you need something that breaks the pattern and kind of makes you interested, and that's why the screens on the forecourt, be that on pillars or on the facade of your Seastore, makes a lot of sense and make a lot of difference. So again, the conversion, as we discussed, is the key thing that everyone is pushing for. On average, in the region in the Middle East, the conversion from fuel to shop is around 20-25%. But then if you introducing screens, interactive screens with the right messaging, you can push that conversion up to 5% more, right? So from 20-25 to 25-30, and that's a significant increase in traffic, right? And then again, you need to make sure that you have the right messaging and the right offer once they actually went inside, but it works, right? So those screens, they work. And then again, in terms of the payment solutions, that's an interesting one, because you have all sorts of things that being kind of talked about, being developed and tested. You have the license plate recognition, something that ADNOC folks are testing, right? So that you pull up to a pump, the camera recognizes your license plate.
ANPR cameras, automatic number plate recognition.
If you have your car registered in the app, they will know that this is you. You normally come and you normally fuel this grade of fuel of that.
So it holds a profile within the application that it's Nikolay, he's of a certain demographic. He usually buys a Kit Kat and a can of Coke.
Exactly. And normally that would allow you to push kind of customized offers, customized promotions to
push notifications onto the mobile app.
Yeah, it could be on the mobile app. It can be on the screen on the pump.
So it's programmatic. Then it's integrating with the content on the screens to have hyper personalized advertising, messaging, offers, etc.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's the idea. Again, it's in early kind of phases, early days. So they have few stations. They're rolling that out gradually. But I think in principle, everyone's looking in solutions like that.
Yeah.
Also in terms of payments, right? Integration of, let's say, your loyalty and payment terminals, right? So it's not about having multiple devices, right? Also from an operation point of view. Back in the day when I joined this industry, and first week I went to the petrol station and worked first as a pump attendant and then as a cashier.
Yeah.
And then as a cashier, you would have all those different terminals in front of you. So this is the bank terminal. Sometimes, depending on providers, it could be 2 terminals, right? So this type of cards here, those type of cards here. Then you have fleet card terminal. Then you have something else. Then you have maybe your loyalty program terminal,
cash.
right? Yeah, cash, of course, right? So you have all those different things and you need to manage that, right? So you feel like almost like a piano player on all those terminals, right? And then how to kind of, integrate all that into one, seamless experience, be that maybe through the phone, right? So you don't need all that. You have everything registered through an app. Everyone's pushing that way, but I wouldn't say, at least I'm not aware of someone who's really kind of, ticked all the boxes and really made it seamless all across, right? But everyone is working on that.
Yeah. So I think that's a good example of AI adoption within gas stations. And I do see across industries, whether it's retail, gas stations, venues, entertainment, that it is going to go down that hyper-personalization route through the vehicle registration, identification, facial recognition, or scanning QR codes, barcodes, to create that seamless, hyper-personalized experience. And it seems in the gas stations, that will be linked to the payments, it will be linked to the offers, linked to what they're seeing on those screens.
Yeah.
Also, what is the role of AI and solutions, computer vision solutions, etc., in the operations of the gas stations? Because I've seen, we're providing these, computer vision solutions, and you can see that you can raise the efficiency of the fueling, health and safety, optimization of your resources. What do you think is the future of this?
Well, definitely all the solutions, all the technologies that will help operations team to make it, faster, easier, more predictable works, right?
Yeah.
A simple example, let's say if you have your fuel delivery on a petrol station, right?
Yeah.
You have your fuel truck coming and you have the discharge area. So you're connecting those pipes and discharge area and so on. So there's a certain kind of health safety procedures that needs to be there. So for example,
This is for the decantering of the fuel. So it's health and safety, there's certain protocols.
Exactly. It's normally quite strict because it's kind of highly inflammable. Yeah.
Isn't that where most number of health and safety issues in a gas station occur, is during the decantation?
Well, it really differs country by country.
Okay.
Right? So somewhere it's, again, not about Middle East, but globally, somewhere it's more towards the Seastore, right? So in some markets, the robberies are really a big thing, right? Not in here, luckily. Sometimes it's the fuel discharge and actually not the, let's say, flames or fires or anything, but actually mixing up the products, right? So the wrong grade goes into the wrong tank, right? So that's a big issue.
That's wastage.
It depends. Again, depends whatever goes where, right? So if it's diesel into mogas, that's a problem. If it's mogas into mogas, you can kind of bring back the octane number, right? But that's too technical. Anyway, what I want to say about the computer vision is that one of the simple things in that protocol is to have a fire extinguisher in the place, right? So, or sometimes 2 or 3 or whatever, depending on the company procedures.
Yeah.
And then it's the role of the fuel truck driver and also the site manager to check that everything is ready for the process. So and sometimes they people, right? They have so much to do, and they have things to worry about, and so on. Maybe sometimes they forget to put the fire extinguisher, and that's could be the time where there's a spark, there's a fire, and fire extinguisher is not there. So it's a big issue. However, with the computer vision, it's very easy, and it's super easy algorithm to check if fire extinguisher is there or not, right?
Yeah.
So and send an alarm. So that is very simple but very impactful. Again, things in the store you have in terms of your merchandising. So let's say if you have an empty shelf or something that is running out, the ordering patterns. So that I have 2 weeks delivery cycle. Then today I have 2 bars of Twix on the shelf.
Yeah.
It means that tomorrow I need to order, so I will have it in place, right? So you have these little things. Again, nobody talks about that because it's too operational, too small, but actually there's a big impact, right? Because if you think of, and this is what I always talk to the petrol station and Seastore folks about, that all those little things, all the little details in the Seastore could make a huge difference, because normally out of the, let's say, 2,000-3,000 SKUs that you have in the store, you have top 100 that is really the ones that making 80% of your business.
What is it, like drinks, smokes?
Yeah, exactly. So here in the Middle East, that would be tobacco, that would be services, that would be drinks. In the UAE, vapes are allowed, so vape is the number 1 category. So you need to have those products in stock all the time, right? So again, tobacco is actually a good example that people, when they purchasing tobacco, they come first time, they want their brand, specific brand. If it's not there, they will give this particular outlet only one more chance. So on the second time they will come, and if the second time their favorite brand and the one they're smoking is not there, customer. They will never come back there, right? And that's statistics.
So stock replenishment is a top priority then in that case.
Especially on those high moving items, the top seller ones. So it needs to be there, and that will it could make your business from unprofitable to profitable just by making sure that that's at least the top 100 ones are in place, right? So that's super important. And again, computer vision element there could help you track that. Again, not relying on human resource, but relying on the algorithm to help you with that.
Yeah, I've seen some really interesting case studies in other regions where weather impacts Seastore purchases.
Yeah,
and they are using algorithms, and they're using information and using AI to harness that information and to trigger content accordingly. So they know under certain weather conditions people are going to want certain foods. Could be the ice cream, but they also know certain purchases as well will be made more during certain weather conditions.
Well, I personally am a bit skeptical about that, right? Because from my experience, it's a ongoing joke in the industry about the weather, right? Because when you have the sales review, right, and in the sales organization you have it, I don't know, weekly, bi-weekly, and so on, right? So if you are overachieving your targets, suddenly you say, we had a great weather, people are coming, they're buying. If you're underachieving, it was a bad weather week.
I used to work, when I was at university, I used to work at O2, which was a mobile phone store. And it was, in the UK, we have high streets, so it's not a shopping mall. So that was one of the excuses. If it was poor sales that Saturday, it would be, it was raining. But in the UK, it's raining like almost every weekend. So there's also that. But I don't think, weather impacts maybe purchases so much here. But what do you see as the future of the Seastore? And, are we going to see a change in those categories as the driver and the passengers change going to store? Like, will those categories change? What is the expectation of those younger drivers? Also with the EVs, will purchases be different then? Because if you've got an EV, I don't know, do you still need oil? You don't, do you?
Yeah, you do.
You do, okay. So, but maybe there might be some other things that you might not need. So will that change?
Well, yeah, a lot of things changing, right? Even before EV, the C-stores are changing even today, right? Because the two main categories in the C-store environment, in the Middle East in particular, are tobacco and services, right? So tobacco meaning your vapes and normal cigarettes, services meaning your phone card, top-up card, your like utility bills, payments, your SALIC roads, the paid roads, and stuff like that. So when it comes to the services, and these two categories together, they actually account for more than half of the sales of the C-stores in the Middle East, right? So it's a massive portion of the business, and it's quite low margin, right? So that's why everyone's pushing coffee to get more margin.
But I guess that's just a driver to get people in, right? To go in, pay your DWA. Once they're in there, they'll buy a packet of crisps.
Exactly. So those are the traffic generating categories. Yeah. And those traffic generation categories are under threat for the C-store business, because if you think of the services, be that your phone bills or utility bills or SALIC, whatever, all those things, you have alternatives now in a digital form. You can now pay for that through an app, on the website, other places, and so on.
That driver's diminishing.
Exactly. You don't need to really go there for that. Tobacco, it's a big category. It doesn't go anywhere anytime soon, but there's more and more stricter regulations in place, right? So hiding tobacco, not showing it, what you can advertise, what cannot be advertised. And again, you have examples around the globe where it's super strict. New Zealand, for example, a couple of years ago, they introduced a new kind of strategy for the cigarettes. I don't know if you heard of that. That if you're 18, you're allowed to buy, right? But if you're 17, you're not allowed. And then every year,
people born after a certain year are not going to be sold.
Exactly. So every year it's increasing by a year. So basically, who are 17 today will never be able to legally purchase tobacco, right? And that's a very harsh stand on this. And I know that authorities in this region are looking at ways to increase health all the time, and tobacco will be impacted one way or another, again, sooner or later, harsher or less harsh, but it will be impacted. So basically your key categories, your anchor categories are under threat. So you need to reinvent yourself. You need to reinvent your C-store anyway, right? Even before the EV drivers stop coming to you, right?
So what does that reinvention look like for this region?
So you see, again, the thing that is, in terms of the advantages for the petrol station businesses, as we discussed before, that people are used to come for other things, right? So you have other services, food, and so on. If you think of fast food outlets, for example, the drive-through on petrol stations is a very important
the McDonald's that I go to near the office is a drive-through at a gas station.
Exactly. So, and for those McDonald's and Burger Kings, let's say in the UAE, it's actually one of the key channels. So I know that, for example, Burger King, they have more than half of their network sitting on petrol stations. So it's the major channel for them. So you have those fast foods, coffee shops and other things. And also what the petrol station companies are now looking into is the franchising operations, right? So those classic kind of fuel pumping guys now going into operating food franchise.
So Papa John's, your KFC.
Exactly. Yeah. So again, ADNOC, they signed with Burger King. They will be running Burger King joints themselves
it's a
franchising agreement. Okay. So ADNOC is a franchisee.
Every single ADNOC will have a Burger King or just prime locations?
It's not every. They have like a badge of locations now. They will evolve it, but anyway, it's now a step into the kind of from just running, let's say, it's kind of specific business, but it's 2-3 products business, right? So you have 91, 95, 98, right? A grade of fuel, and that's it. Going into the C-store, 2,000 SKUs. With no preparation, and then going into being a food operator where you have, again, hundreds of products, complex kitchen operations, and so on. So those companies, they're trying to evolve their skills and their capabilities to run those type of businesses. So being a food operator, food franchisee is one of the directions there. Adding additional services is another, right?
Add cloud kitchens.
And that's exactly right. So the last mile and the accessibility into those little areas where those gas stations are. This is the kind of the real estate, the property that they have. This is their strength, right? Because they're inside the communities. And then how you use that real estate, whether you operate something on that real estate on your own or you bring in partners, that's something that will,
Because what I haven't seen here, but I've seen at the gas station at the top of my road in England, is an Amazon hub.
Right.
So it's a pickup point.
Yeah.
So you can go there. And of course, once you're there, you're going to pick up a coffee and you're already at a convenience store. So.
Exactly. So, all those things. And I know that in almost in each company that I work with and interact with, there are regularly some strategic sessions and some, sessions where you're trying to kind of come up with the ideas, what are the services we need, what other things are there, but it always needs to start with the customer, right? So who are the customer in this particular place, what actually they need, who they are, how old they are, where they work, how they move around, and so on. So you need to have that almost like location-based analysis of your customers to make sure that you're using your real estate properly. So in the past, when you have the monopoly on fuel, on energy, it's easy, right? So whoever drives the car, your customer, right? You don't need to differentiate that much. Now you need to make sure that you know your customer first at the network level, then at the region level. But now, the further we go, it needs to be almost like a store by store, location by location. You need to understand your demographics, and that's a challenging task.
So some of the things that I've seen change over the last 8 years here in the UAE is definitely the screens coming in. So the screens and the future of that, we've spoken about will be that personalization. And I think the McKinsey study shown that 71% of customers expect personalization. So there's that. Another great change that I saw here, I can't remember when, I think it was probably a few years ago, was on the go. Concept. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, was it ADNOC who had the first one? I
think so,
On the go, So perhaps you can talk me through, the logic behind opening those up, how they're picking those locations, and what you think of, the future of that concept.
So on the go, I think for those who don't know what is on the go, it's kind of modular petrol station, right? So you have a unit that is single unit where you have everything inside. So you have the fuel tank inside, you have the pumps, the dispensers there, and you have a place for your staff and cashier and everything, right? So it's basically...
So they're still manned. They're not autonomous. They're still at the moment they're manned, but I think the infrastructure is such that they could be fully autonomous.
If tomorrow something's changing...
I guess it's just the nature of this region wanting,
someone in there for 2 grades, right? So it could be 9195 or 9598 depending on the area. So and that is modular. So it's something that is either prefabricated elsewhere and just dropped in place, or something that is assembled on the place. But what is important about this on-the-go concept, and that's why it's picking up, everyone else is doing that. So in the UAE, let's say not only ADNOC, but ENOC and Emirat, they're doing the same.
Emirat have E2.
E2 is their kind of sub-brand for smaller type of locations. It's not only on the go, but also smaller station, also under E2 brand. Anyway, so on the go now, I know that companies in Oman doing similar things and so on. So that on-the-go concept is picking up, and it works because you have drastically lower capex, right? So instead of building the whole thing, you're building a small unit.
Smaller real estate.
And also no underground works. Almost no underground works, right? Because one of the elements that is taking quite some time is to dig out, the place for putting the underground tanks, right? Putting them, making the infrastructure, covering everything back.
So where are the tanks in the on-the-go?
It's inside these
units?
Inside the unit, So everything is in there.
So it's above ground?
Yeah, the tanks are above the ground. So you only need to provide some piping for the fuel discharge when it's delivered, but then the rest is just above the ground. So it basically, from the, let's say, 3 to 5 months construction time, it's around 3 weeks to build a station, right? So that's shorter cycle. You can introduce that.
So most of fabrications, obviously, we're fabricating them, so they're all done in the factory, and then it's just like the installation of like 3 weeks and you're up and going.
Exactly. So it's lower capex, lower time, so you can go to places, go to market faster.
Yeah.
And also what is great is that you can test a location by that, right? So maybe somewhere you have a small plot, you cannot really build a full station, but maybe somewhere you have a full plot, but you have the, you're not sure if you have the right kind of customer profile.
So you can test the waters.
Exactly.
And then you can expand on that footprint.
So basically you put that on-the-go unit there, you see how that goes for a year. After a year, maybe you decide, you know what, it's a great place, I will build a full-scale station there. And this unit, you can actually remove and place it in the next spot.
Okay, so that's also part of their strategy and thinking is that they can just change the location. Because the first one that I saw was actually in a residential community.
Okay.
And thinking about it, that's probably what they were doing. They were probably, it was testing the waters. Do we have enough traffic within this residential community or not?
Yeah.
Or within a residential community, maybe 2 pumps is enough.
Yeah.
You know, to serve just that local area.
Yeah. Exactly.
So before we wrap up, I guess I'd want to get a little bit of an insight into, you know, what would you like to see as change? What do you think will be imminent changes? And what will be those long-term changes that we will see?
Oof. that's a tough question, right?
Yeah.
Because it's kind of, you know,
You're the expert.
Yeah, hope so. Yeah, everything in one, right? So I think what needs to change already now is the way how those companies are thinking about their customers, profiling and segmenting their customers and understanding them better.
Yeah. So more on that data analytics, because there's so much data there. We talk about big data. And I guess what you're trying to say is harnessing it?
Yeah, exactly. So you have, and I know that those companies, they gather that data, in one way or another, but then how you use it, how you actually work on it, and how you translating the data to an insight into action, right? So that is
data-driven business decisions.
Absolutely. So, and that is something that needs to happen yesterday, right?
Yeah.
So they need to start looking into their consumers differently. Then on a kind of midterm horizon, I think the flexibility of formats, right? So, and all those companies, they look into, again, on the go, smaller, bigger, you know, whether you need EV or not, whether you need food or not, and so on. So that kind of flexibility, and almost like we used to talk about Lego bricks, right? So where you have not a kind of how you call it, the cookie cutter approach, but the Lego brick approach, where you have specific location, and based on the data, you're then building specific elements.
So you're tailoring it specific for that community that it's serving.
Exactly. And then longer term, this is where the complete shift into the what the EV experience is like, right? So what are the stations or hubs or mobility hubs?
Would you call them like repurposing them?
Yeah, it could be. It could be repurposing of some of the existing real estate. Maybe they would need to get rid of some locations and acquire completely different locations, right? So maybe instead of, you know, a station in 20 years time, they will, you know, just sell it and build an apartment block, and that's maybe a better business for them, right? But then they would need to have those hubs in some other areas where they would provide, you know, additional services and,
conveniences. So throughout our life and before, the physical look of a gas station has always been the same. Apart from the on the go, I think it looks different. It's got a very different look. But otherwise, the ones serving more than 4 or 5 pumps, you have a canopy, you have a totem giving you your gas pricing, and a hut type convenience store. Is that going to change? Have you seen any that look different? There's the Enoch Gas Station of the Future Expo. Perhaps you can just talk through that. And what will it physically look like in the future?
Well, that's an interesting one. You see, this is one of the favorite topics for the fuel companies' management, right? So let's do a station of the future. Let's do something different.
Let's
right?
jazz it up a little.
Yeah, exactly, right? So there are different forms. If you look around the globe, you have really some really beautiful designs, right? So something out of this world. You know, the kind of interlinked canopies. Some cantilevered canopies and so on, right? So you have all all the different designs, but normally it's a one-off, right?
Yeah.
Because it's a major capex investment. You need to develop that. You need to make sure that it works, that it holds in place, that nothing is falling apart, and so on, right? So normally those things are kind of a one-off thing.
Okay.
But there's a lot of those flagships, and the one that Enoch did for the expo is also very interesting, because you have very beautiful, a lot of different new techniques, engineering, materials, the technologies,
sustainability angle of it as well.
Exactly. I think they have highest certification in terms of how sustainable that place is. They're repurposing everything, reusing, and so on. So again, some of those more practical elements of how you make it more sustainable, more energy efficient, I think that is something that you can roll out. Making the canopies and the pumps out of the carbon fiber everywhere.
I've seen canopies with the solar panels.
Yeah. Solar panels again is an easy win, right? So you can just put that
on the canopy
on top. In terms of the shape of the fuel station
layout,
itself, that is interesting, because as the kind of the dwelling time changes, right? The consumer behavior and type of consumer changing. I think the shape and form of petrol stations will change.
Okay.
So think of it again more of a hub. Think of it more of a almost like a mini mall or a strip mall, where instead of having the centerpiece of pumps and then the rest is kind of on the outside, maybe you have something like a U-shape mall where you have those EV charging kind of in front of the building. You have additional parking in the middle, and then you have all those different services surrounding. Maybe you have something on top with the seating and so on. So you have because the type of consumers and how they what they will be doing in those
will be changing.
Spots. That's changing. Yeah. So that's why I think that again we don't know for sure, but that's just a few thoughts that I would have. Yeah.
And a single word answer for the last question: your favorite gas station in the world?
My favorite. Oh wow. That's a tough one. I wasn't prepared for that. There's I would
single
name.
word, Nikolay, was meant to be. You're just meant to pick.
No. I will pick three of them.
Okay.
I will pick three of them. So one is personal, sentimental thing for me. Is one of the Shell stations in Moscow that the first one that I opened myself. Yeah. Right. So that is just a milestone for me personally. So that's that.
Yeah.
Right. Then the two others that are significant for the industry, I would say GridSurf in the UK.
Okay.
Because they're creating EV-only station, right? So, and this is, again, it's not perfect, but it's the first attempt to create...
The concept you're invested into,
Exactly, creating a EV-only station, right? And lastly, I would say some of the Circle K in Norway. Yes, let's say Bamble is one of those, where it's the flagship and where you have the duality of energy. So you have the EV dedicated forecourt, and you have the fuel forecourt. So, and you have all those technology and everything serving those two types of customers, EV and fuel, because this is the important kind of example for the industry.
Great.
Those three.
Nikolay, thank you so much for your time and for sharing your insights and thoughts into the future of gas stations.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome.
Rhine and Shine podcast brought you by Blue Rhine Industries.